we have to remember that last year the LDP coalition lost the lower house election. They lost a majority there. And there's a growing expectation, according to the polls, that the LDP coalition could lose a majority in this upper house election on Sunday. I think the interesting thing, though, Sherry, is that the markets are already moved to an extent and are pricing that an outcome of the leading coalition, LDP, losing a majority by a small margin. I think that's largely priced. So the risks, the two sides are really that either they lose by a very large margin, and then the opposition parties are a lot more powerful and will come into the coalition, or they actually surprise and actually keep a majority. That would be the biggest surprise, I think, and could cause the long end JGB yields to rally quite a bit.
Yeah, and depending on the outcome, obviously it will dictate the outcome of the tariff negotiation with the United States. But Rob, I do want to get your lines around what you see in terms of the correlation between Japan's exports to the United States and what kind of a tariff impact Japan is likely to face in correlation to U.S. growth story. Walk us through your thinking here.
Yeah, I mean, there's two effects there, Sherry. So, in terms of the tariffs, the direct effect, there will be an impact, I think, particularly on the auto sector in Japan, which they're very concerned about. It seems like auto companies in Japan have been cutting prices to try to keep market share in Japan. So their margins are probably already under pressure. But the other part of it, as you talk about, is going to be whether the U.S. economy holds up. And if the U.S. economy weakens as well as tariffs, then it's a double whammy. So, from that perspective, our view is that because of the tariff impact and because underlying inflation, when you take out rice prices and energy, is still below 2%, we still feel the BOJ is going to be cautious on raising rates, and we don't have another rate hike until January next year. But, just going back to the elections, I think the other big risk is if the LDP coalition does very poorly and loses a majority by a big margin, and one of the opposition parties has to join the coalition and wants a more expansionary fiscal policy. That is another danger for Japan.
What about the likelihood of a consumption tax cut? Because it seems to me that all the parties, across the entire political spectrum, everybody wants to have that.
That's right. But it's a bit more nuanced, Martin, in terms of some of the parties want a consumption tax only cut for food items only. There's others, like the Democratic Progressive Party of Japan, that wants across-the-board consumption tax cut. That would be a lot bigger. But, that outcome could lead to, a much more expansionary fiscal policy, ultimately. The other things to think about is if the LDP does very badly, Japan may need a new prime minister as well, so the leadership could change. And then the other third thing is the trade talks with the US.
Yeah. Who are they going to talk to?
Exactly. That could also create delays.
Yeah. So look, there's more than an even chance they could lose their majority, the LDP and Komeito, right, over the weekend on the 20th. If that does happen, what should we be expecting in terms of price reaction? We've got, let's bring up the charts again. Their 10 is at 157, so it's backed off some, but it was up at 159, I think, just a day or so ago. And that's the highest we've seen for their benchmark in probably about, 17 years, all the way going back to 08. And their long paper, 30, 40-year paper, that's up at record highs. So LDP coalition loses their majority. What happens to dollar-yen? What happens to their yields?
So if it's a small loss, I think it's largely priced already. Okay. And I think the risk would actually be that we see 30-year yields actually come down a bit. and the yen could actually strengthen a bit. So I think a lot of it, there's been big moves in the JGB market in particular, Martin. I think the moves in markets are going to be more if it's a massive loss by the LDP coalition, so a big loss of majority. In that case, you could see a further sell-off. But that's not our base case. That would be one risk. And then the other, and if that happens, we could see the BOJ coming in with rinban operations and actually adjusting their JGB purchases and the scale of declines. And the yen could actually go through 150 in that case, and a really big loss. But the other extreme that the market is not expecting is LDP surprise and they actually hold on to their majority. And if that happens, I think that's where you could actually get a big rally in buying of JGBs and also the yen starting to appreciate.